beauty is in the breaking, and healing comes in the taking of the wounds of Christ. As joy can follow crying, living will follow dying when we die in Christ. It goes against the way I think that it should be. The imperfection seems to suit him perfectly. The sacred fingerprints upon our broken beauty. Hey, 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 hey. Sometimes strength it is found in weakness. When empty we find completeness through the love of Christ. As hope follows desperation, so I have found salvation through your grace, oh Christ. It goes against the way I thought that it could be, that God would share the mind of Christ with me, and his sacred hand will fashion broken beauty. Oh, oh. As I hide from you in mourning and face the dark with nervous laughter, somehow the moments that are miracles, I never know them until after. Oh, I never know them until after. Da-da-da-da-da. It goes against the way I thought that it should be, that imperfection seems to suit him perfectly. Sacred fingerprints upon our broken beauty. Yeah, yeah. It goes against the way I thought that it could be, that God would wrap in flesh His holy mystery, a perfect sacrifice became our broken beauty. Broken beauty.
Hi, how are you doing today? My name is Ron, and I have lots of friends.
I'll never forget good old what's her name. I have always wanted to sneeze. People don't believe that I'm 62 years old. They say that I look much, much younger. And I tell them the secret of my success and my youthful looks is simply this. I gain, perhaps 3 to 5 pounds every year, at least. And it expands my skin, keeps it tight. There's no room for wrinkles. Well, I stopped beating my wife in checkers shortly after I beat her in chess. Well, because I was so superior to all the people that I hung around with. They didn't like me because I was always right. always right, and it just made them feel bad about their intelligence and looks. Yes, and looks too, because I was always the best looking guy. And so they, yeah, that's why I only had a few friends. And Ray didn't bother Ray much because we looked quite a bit alike. I just made that part up. Always right. I was always right. I was always right. I was always right, always right. I don't know that it so much changed. I mean, it was evolving, if I can use that word, because Dave and Lorna were married. I mean, people were getting married and the older kids, and we were in high school, and so it was just moving along. Ray had just moved out the previous September to go to college in Winnipeg, and so there was, my best friend Ray wasn't there anymore, and so it was just evolving. And I think that we've always been close, or we feel close, but not that anybody was needy of anybody else. Like, I've always felt like anyone from my family would be there for me if I asked them to be. But, I didn't feel like I needed to ask them, and it wasn't any big deal. We just keep in contact at least once a year, and by a phone call or a letter or something, and each one of us lived their own lives, and so it wasn't important for us to be together at any time, really. In fact, Mom's favorite saying to us as kids, "Would you go outside and play?" Like, "Get out of the house! There's too many people around here." That kind of idea would come there. So, I mean, I still feel close to everybody, but it's people from my motorcycle gang that I hang around with and so on. We probably have more social time and so on than I ever had with his siblings. It's just the way. I mean, I'm sure that we all think the same way about it. I like my siblings, but I don't need them around all the time. So me and Vicky. Well, we met in grade 9 when we moved to Swan River. The McClellands moved to Swan River, and she was a very attractive girl in grade 9, and I was the guy from Mi'kmaq, where we wore blue jeans to school and had brush cuts. Nobody in Swan River wore blue jeans to school. In fact, it was against the rules, but nobody told me that. And nobody had brush cuts. So I thought of myself as being somewhat geeky new guy in the school. So I didn't even ask her to go to a dance or anything like that. And it was just about a year later, actually September 17th, 1965, it would be almost 2 years later, we had our first date, and we went to a dance in Bozeman. And we were just goofing around and pretending that, oh yes, this will be a long-lasting relationship, and we'll get married right after high school. And, we were goofing around. And that's how it happened. We just goofed around, and after high school, Vicky went to Brandon University for a while and then said this isn't for her and went into nursing in Winnipeg, and I went into the Mounties, and I got posted out to Vancouver, and we wrote letters a lot and made phone calls, and we were madly in love, and that was started 46 years ago or whenever it was, and we've just celebrated our 40th anniversary. She says she's been happily married for about 39 years. And I say 40 because I guess I wasn't paying attention to the bad year or all the days put together. But she's been my girl all this time.
after we were married and so on, then we got 4 more girls. Brenda, Bonnie, Becky, and Barbara, our daughters. So, and I've just enjoyed my kids immensely every stage of the way, even when they were teenagers. In fact, that was even maybe more fun, but I like playing with toddlers and everything. It's just joy to our life. Why the bees? Well, the truth, from my perspective, is our first was going to be Rhonda if she was a girl. And then after she was overdue about a week, somebody asked me, well, how are you going to spell Rhonda? And I didn't have a clue. Because there's a bunch of different ways to spell Rhonda. So I said, that's a stupid name. Let's change it. If it's a girl, it'll be Brenda, because there's only one way to spell Brenda. And we liked that name, so we said, we'll go for Brenda. And how do you get them mixed up? It's no problem. The first vowel in each one is in order, you know, A, E, I, O, U, only backwards. Or something like that. I don't know. It's not that hard to remember. We've called them that all our lives. And theirs. Oh, all their lives, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, we were weird anyway. So it sort of fit in the pattern. Yeah, I guess it would have been kind of weirded out. Oh, yeah, we're wonderful. It's all my influence, really. And those of you who know us know that that's a lie. Yeah, I am thrilled with how things are. As a preacher, you know, there's been different times where there's sort of been the fad of, you know, you got to preach a series on how to raise a family and all that sort of stuff. I never touched that thing for all the years until they were all grown up and out of the house and launched. And then I did a 2-sermon series on how to raise kids. And that was the 10 Commandments, basically. You're an example, they'll follow your example. You know, if you walk with God, there's a better chance they will. And that was basically it. And I preached that series once. One on Father's Day and one on Mother's Day. I split it. First 5 and then 6 to 10. And they're serving the Lord, serving people in all parts of the world. And you know, Becky's here in Edmonton, and she's working in the inner city and very involved in her church. And Brenda just went to Indonesia, where she's working in community development under a daughter organization from the denomination. Wade and Bonnie, who are in Thailand with their 5 kids. They're in Thailand, working in the area of rescuing children from the sex trade industry. And Brett and Barbara and their 2 boys are in China establishing businesses so that they can be there. I guess they figured, you know, a quarter of the world's population is Chinese. You know, they might join with the majority and live in that country. And they have fun. They're having fun. Well, you know, I've never had favorites. I have my favorite oldest daughter, my favorite second oldest daughter, my favorite third oldest daughter, and my favorite 4th oldest daughter. My best friend growing up in Nipawin was probably, well, it was always my brother Ray. We were buddies. His buddies were my buddies and vice versa, and we all hung around, even though there was 3 years difference. And that went right on until he went off to school. I mean, I had other friends, and I was in Cubs and Scouts and Air Cadets and so on. Had other friends, but Ray was my best friend. We did all kinds of stuff together. And then when he went off to university or teacher's college,
I was in a rock band, and they were my friends, and I was dating Vicky, and she was my best friend, and I have a very short list of best friends. I have a lot of friends. I like people. I really like people. Uh, Even jerks, I like them most of the time. Yeah, John Wayne, he's good. Yeah, oh, what's his name that I like now as an actor is. But then who cares who I like as an actor, because they're not even the people that they seem to be, because they would, if they were, they'd be acting. Anyhow, it's always been a puzzle to me why people give a rip about actors, other than that they make you happy. What's his name? The guy who was on the island all by himself, and he was captain in no Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, I remember the volleyball.
Yeah, that's
Wilson.
Wilson. Yeah, Wilson was the volleyball, but the other guy, the actor's name,
Tom.
Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is the other favorite actor. What?
The real favorite.
Yeah, yeah. Once in Swan River, I fell off the DKW because somebody left the gate open around the racetrack. And it come around the track and around the corner, and the gate's open. But that's the only time. The first house I remember was at Wicklow on the farm outside of Grandview, and there were 7 of us children in there. It was 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and a farmhouse. I guess it was an old farmhouse. I remember it was heated by wood. There was a wood stove in the living room area, and then there was the boys' room, and there was the girls' room, and in off the kitchen was Mom and Dad's bedroom, and that was the whole house. It had a neat feature in it. It had a dumbwaiter, which was a setup so that you could put your, kind of took the place of a fridge, and you could put food in it, and through a series of ropes you could go downstairs. It would go down into the basement where it was cooler. Things would be kept cool. I don't think we had a fridge or anything. It was a wood stove. And I remember that house. It got moved into Grandview, and it's still there today, apparently. Been renovated somewhat. Let's see, the next house in town, it was quite similar in that it had a boys' room and a girls' room, and Mom and Dad's room across, or by the kitchen. Also a dining room and a living room. And an indoor bathroom. That was so nice. We didn't have to go charging outside in our socks like we did in other places. Oh, that's just about it. Our favorite room, my favorite room in the house was either the kitchen, because that's where we would eat, or outside was the favorite room, because that's where Mom would always tell us to go to play. Go play outside. And so we did. And as long as we showed up in time for meals, that was all that was necessary.
Hey, and we got that couple with Garrison and his sister. They were behind us today again.
That noisy little boy.
The noisy little boy. I love that little guy. I don't know why. I just got very attracted to that little family. So I like them. And the couple in front of us, the old couple, talking about stories. Her early memories of her childhood. She was in Germany, and the American bombers were coming over and dropping bombs on her house.
Who was that?
Elfrida.
Oh, telling you about.
No, she told me a long time ago about her story. But it's amazing the stories that people have. And another guy that's across there, he wasn't there today, but his wife and 2 daughters were there. They're black folks, and he was another refugee camp pastor. Started a church, and he had a church of 500 or 600. Somehow he got a master's degree too, and so on. And he's, how I go around and I greet people and I look like a pastor or something, that I actually care about people, because I do. But he's the same way, this guy. And I called him pastor one time, and that was before I knew his story. And I just said to him, "And how are you today, pastor?" And he looked at me and he said, "Why do you call me pastor?" I said, "Because you seem to be a pastor. You care about the people around." A teacher.
Oh.
He just seems to be a pastor. And I guess he was, he's a social worker, is his official thing. But he was struggling with whether or not he should look into some of these pastoring opportunities that were being presented to him. But he wasn't sure whether he was still a pastor, whether he was a social worker now, and so on. I said, "You're a pastor." And his kids and his wife are pastors too. They look after other people, shepherd them, just instinctually. But he wasn't there today. So.
Reggie? Yeah, you like your mom, man.
Oh, pardon me.
Hey. How are you?
Boy, I'd like to tell you the stories of all these people.
We might have time.
And that guy and his wife and 5 kids from South Sudan, he started the church in a refugee camp, and then when he finally got over here to Canada, he started the church here, and now he's one of the pastors in our church. And he's got a congregation of about, I don't know, 70, 80 people, and he's just such a great guy. And the stories he tells of miracles and so on, you'd think he was a Pentecostal.
When I was growing up, when our family was growing up, it was the 1950s in Canada, and the cultural thing to do was to go to church every Sunday. There was no Sunday shopping, there was no Sunday sports, there was no TV, there was nothing to do except go to church. And in our family, there wasn't religious harmony in our family, because Dad had some leanings towards Jehovah's Witness, and Mom was United Church. But as often is the case, Mom won out, and Dad stayed home and read the paper. And so we all went to Sunday school. And I remember my sister Jean was my Sunday school teacher when I was about 5 years old. And we kept going to Sunday school. And it was, you know, I'm sure that the Lord used that in some ways to put some kind of foundation in our lives. But it wasn't any kind of personal conviction. It was a cultural thing. And we were all involved in it until we got to be teenagers and we were too old to be made to go to church. Although I did continue until I finished high school, because it seemed to be the only gathering of cool kids to hang around with at that time. In fact, I preached a New Year's Eve sermon once, and because I was in the executive of the youth group. And so that was my first sermon ever. New Year's Eve, 1964, I think it was. And it was hard to do because most of my friends were sitting in about the 8th row drunker than skunks, and they were laughing at me. And I was trying to keep a straight face and say something of significance. But I didn't really. It was much more cultural. But now, when it's less than 20% of people in Canada go to church or synagogue or anything like that, we just have so much different. It's different. I mean, even when I became a pastor, there was no Sunday sports still, and no Sunday shopping or anything. It was just, everybody knew that's the way a godly society operated. It's different now. You know, people have shopping, they have to go to work, they have sports is more important. And even in one church, I had a Saturday evening service because so many people were skipping out of church because there was Sunday morning hockey, and that was more important. So changes have been made over the years.
By the time a few more people come out of there, I'll remember the name of that kid, Gino. That's his name. Didn't leave. He just left. Gino McClelland. Oh.
So, how regular are you at Starbucks, and does it keep you regular?
Starbucks and regular around the clock. I am at Starbucks 5 days out of 7 in the morning, and occasionally it'll be 2 times in one day. But I think what keeps me regular has nothing to do with Starbucks. It has to do with some of the pills that I take. You know? The can I help you pills?
I think, what have I learned about people? Mostly I've learned that audiovisual people sometimes don't put all their ducks in a row, and that, you know, you can't get your ducks in a row, your ketchkas and your bonk. Such a problem. Well, on the farm I was really too young to have a chore list or things to do on the farm, but we moved into town, and our job, Ray and I, we did everything together. We went down to get the drinking water, which was from a well that was in the middle of the intersection by the school. We'd go down there and with our buckets of water and pump the town pump, and we'd bring water home. And that was kind of a very important. I always felt like it was important to be trusted with this responsibility. I remember feeling very responsible that I was grown up and helpful by going down to this town pump, which was about a block away. from our house, maybe a little more, and we'd pick up water for the whole family to drink in. And I felt that was a responsible job, and I liked contributing. You know, just instead of being outgoing resources, I was bringing things in. So when we moved to Neepawa, and I was 8 years old, Ray got a paper route of 20 papers, and he thought, well, he could afford to give me 8 of them. He gave me 8, and he took 12, and we both had paper routes. And the exciting thing for me was I was contributing. And from that point on, I never, well, I always bought my own school supplies, I bought my own clothes, and so on. Once Mom bought me a jacket, and this is how I remember this. Once Mom bought me a jacket, but the rest of the time, I was totally self-sufficient, except for food and a place to sleep, kind of thing. So, and I felt good. I'm contributing, and it's always been important for me to contribute. Now, there was one time when we asked Dad for some money. Ray and I wanted to go see the Hell Drivers. That was a touring group that came in through Neepawa, and they drove their 58 Chevys around the track, around the racetrack, and they would do all sorts of tricks. They'd have one guy standing on the top of the car, and like he had reins of the horse, and the guy would go over jumps while this guy is on top of the car, and all sorts of stuff. But we didn't have enough money to pay to get in. So we were going to sneak in, but we felt bad about sneaking in. So we asked Dad for some money. And Dad went into one of his explanations of how the world economy worked and how family economy worked. And it was that money didn't grow on trees, and that if you wanted something, you saved up for it and you worked for it and so on. But we hadn't left. We still wanted money from Dad. And so he took out his wallet and he fired it across the room at us. You want the money? You take the money. You know. And of course, the thing was, that was supposed to trick us into running away without taking the money. But what happened, Ray and I looked at each other, and I remember we smiled at each other, and we picked up Dad's wallet, and we took out the money, and then we threw the wallet back at him and ran. And I remember hearing Dad yelling at us, but it was hard for him to yell because he was also laughing quite hard. And then we went to see the Hell Drivers that night. And so Dad contributed to our entertainment fund. One time, there was a TV show then, it was called My Three Sons, and it was about a dad and his 3 sons. And so somehow it came up that it would be a good idea some weekend for Dad and his 3 sons, Dave, Ray, and myself, to go up to Swan River, where Dad was a teenager. And so we hopped in the 58 Plymouth, and we went up to Swan River area, and we drove through the countryside, and Dad has said, that's the school I went to, and I used to work on this farm, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, after a while, we got a little bored, but as he was trying to find a new place, he got lost out in the country, and we didn't know how to get back, or he didn't know how to get back. He says, this isn't familiar, and I'm just, a little kid, and Ray and I were little kids, but I was the littlest one, and I thought, oh no, we're lost. We're going to be stuck in Swan River Valley for the rest of our life, and we'll never get home again, and so on. All the big fears of getting lost in the wilderness were in my mind, and I started crying. And of course, that's not really a good thing to do with a bunch of guys trying to bond in a car trip, and because I was just a little guy, and who needs a little guy that's going to be crying all the time? And Dad started yelling, and Dave trying to get me to shut up, and Ray, he just looked at me, and he was almost going to cry too, and back and forth. And then finally we got our way out of there. But it was a good bonding time, but it wasn't really a good time all the time. I do the same thing to my kids now as I take them back to when they were little and so on. And they keep saying, Dad, I'm sure glad we moved out of this town. Come on. Come on up. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's see what we got. Okay, what do you think? Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And this is my dog, Max. He is the first male dog, first male of anything other than me in our family. And so we're buddies, Max and me. Well, Max, what do you think? We have a good relationship, and I just enjoy him. He takes me out. He's my personal trainer. He takes me out for a walk every morning and just about every night after supper. And we go for a walk together, and he makes sure that I'm healthy. In fact, I'm quite sure that I remain as healthy as I am. I mean, other than cancer and diabetes and various other life-threatening conditions, I'm in pretty good shape. And it's mostly thanks to this dog who wants to go for a walk all the time. And I think the reason he likes to do that is because I have cookies in my pocket, but I'm all out, buddy. You got them all. You got them all. Yeah. Now what are you going to do? Yeah. People mock me for moving around, but you know, I'm a mover and a shaker. Halfway through grade, Max, come back here before you pull the camera over. Max, come here. Come here. Come on, maybe I'll find another cookie for you. Okay, now go out over here. Go out over here. That's a boy. That's a boy. Yep, lie down there. That's my boy. Halfway through grade 9, we moved from Neepawa to Swan River, Manitoba. And so I entered Swan River Collegiate Institute at Christmas 62, pardon me, 62 I think. And I was in the same home classroom as Vicky Scales. But I was the weirdest duck in the whole school because I had blue jeans, a t-shirt, a brush cut, and a big zit on the end of my nose. And it wasn't until about a month after I'd been there that one of the teachers took pity on me and said, Ron, you know, you may have noticed that no one else in our high school wears blue jeans, because that's the student rule, that's the clothing rule, is you have to wear dress pants and a sports shirt. And I was and then I started noticing things like this, and I was the only guy in the school with a brush cut, and so I let my hair grow out and so on. And so that was what I remember about my school experience. I don't remember much about English, French, history, or those things that you go to school for. I never did remember much of them, but I remembered enough to pass through from grade 9 to 10, 10 to 11. And in September of 1965, I started dating Vicki Scales. And it was in grade 11, and I had just been asked to be part of a rock band called The Gentlemen, and the Beatles were becoming popular and so on. So I let my hair grow out, and I learned to play bass guitar a little bit, and then I was one of the cool guys on campus, and Vicky's brother, who was in the band also, he said, "It's okay, Ron, if you ask my sister out." And she said, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll go with you, Ron." And we started dating a little bit, and then kept on dating until today. I mean, actually, right on through. 6 years of dating, then we got married, and so it's been a total of 47 years that we've been together. And I don't regret it a moment. Well, there was that one Tuesday night that, never mind. Vicki would say that she doesn't regret hardly any except a few days, but anyway. I never finished high school. I flunked physics, which was strange. The reason I flunked physics is because I never studied it at all for the exam, because I never had any problems with physics. I passed the Christmas and Easter exams just no problem at all, and then the final exam, I flunked it. And I could never figure out why. But I did rewrite it and got it, but by then I had missed one other one. So I never graduated from high school, but Vicki did, so I figured, that's enough. Then I ended up in Winnipeg, working at a warehouse, record distributing, and Vicki was working at Great West Life, and that only lasted for a year or two for both of us there. And then I went on to the Mounted Police, and Vicki went on to nursing. She did her training in Winnipeg at the Grace Hospital, and I went to Regina for training in the Mounties, and I got posted out to Vancouver after I was finished. And that was, I did quite well on the academics of the RCMP Academy, and I did quite well in that. Got sent out to BC, and then I was your basic general duties policeman in Richmond for a while, and then went to the high-speed pursuits of freeway patrol. And then we were married during that time, and then I got transferred to Victoria, to headquarters, where I worked in the communications, dispatching and coding and all that kind of stuff. We used good old-fashioned telex machines, and the last year I was in, we started with computers, and that was the beginning of computers and police work together in 1973. And then that's when I came to know the Lord. It was actually 72, and then my contract expired with the Mounties, and I went into ministry after 5 years in the Mounted Police. And that's all I have to say about that. If I missed anything, well, there you go. But I have it in my file cabinet downstairs. Well, when I went, I've never been very good at tiptoeing through the tulips. So when I came to faith in Christ, I was very excited. My life was changed. I didn't go through a decision-making process. I went through a conversion process. I went in as one person, and I started out the other side, and I was very excited with how my life was changing. And I would, any mounted policeman that I worked with or that I met on the elevator or anything would hear about what happened to me. And I would invite them to church, I would invite them to special meetings and so on. And it came to the point where some of them were really quite concerned that I had slipped a few discs and in my brain, and they evaluated whether they should consider whether mental illness was sufficient enough for a discharge from the Mounties, and then they realized that it wasn't, and so on. And I still kept lending them cigarettes or giving them cigarettes when they asked me, so I couldn't be all that bad. I just enjoyed the guys, and I tried to help them, and they were a little concerned about me, and so. But I lasted till my contract was out, and by the time it was out, every one of them individually asked me, "Ron, we thought you were crazy, but I really want to know what happened, because it seems that you've changed." And so I got a chance to share with every one of them. So it was an enjoyable time. This is my favorite police story. This is the one that I tell to my grandkids all the time. And they keep asking for it because they remember it, I guess. One night I'm on patrol, dark night, foggy night in Richmond. And by this time I'd been in active police work for about 2 years and so on. And believe it or not, I was one of the senior guys on patrol. And dark, foggy night, driving around, and got a call from one of the junior guys, "Help, I'm going to a family disturbance, and there's a lot of noise going on and so on, and family disturbances are dangerous things." So I thought, I got to get there to help this guy. And so I put my brain in gear, and I think, okay, I'm on Blundell Street, and this is how I get to that place in a hurry. So I put the pedal to the metal, and then out of the fog came the railway tracks. And it was quite a steep slope up the railway tracks and to the other side on William Street. I thought I was on Blundell, but I was really on William Street. And so I hit those railway tracks at a fairly high rate of speed, and I left the ground, and there was silence until I hit the ground, and I almost lost control, but I got it back under control, and I got to the house in time to help my fellow policeman. But I put in the story, always make sure you're on the right road before you mat it out, because you might not be on the right road, and sometimes the fog is heavy. But I did learn, there's another one that I learned about flying police cars. That happened twice, but something like that happened twice. But yes, cars can fly. What else can I say? In both cases, it was because I wasn't paying enough attention. And I wasn't hurt, and neither were the police cars. That I know of. That I cared. I went straight to, Vicki and I both went on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ. And we had, this was a totally new thing for us and for our families, and it was a new thing that we went as faith missionaries, and we trusted God to find people to be part of our support team financially and prayer and so on, and God provided for us, and we went, and we both worked in their headquarters that was in Abbotsford, and I worked in materials management and in the warehouse, shipping books and that kind of thing, our publications, and Vicki worked in the accounting department. And we just had a great time. And it was at the same time that our family started arriving, and Brenda came into the picture, and shortly after that, Bonnie came into the picture. And after 5 years with Campus Crusade, we felt we'd had some experience as with a small group that developed into a church in Mission, BC, the Mission Alliance Church, and I just really enjoyed being in church leadership. I was sort of filling the pastoral role on a part-time basis, and so after 5 years with Crusade, we ended up leaving and going to Canadian Bible College in Regina, and I got my theology degree, and we went into pastoral ministry. And Prince Albert, I was an associate for a year and a half, and then went on to the Paul, Manitoba, where I was solo pastor there, and that was just an awful lot of fun. Well, Prince Albert was too. Most stuff I like doing. I enjoy myself. And we were in the PAW for 4 years, and then we went to Rostron, Saskatchewan the PAW was 6 years, and then we went to Rostron, Saskatchewan, where we were there for 4 years, and then we went up to Fort McMurray in Alberta for 3 years, I think it was, before I had opportunity to go with Campus Crusade again to in international ministries. Went to Nigeria, and then to Ukraine, and Costa Rica, and just different places, mostly in Europe, in Ukraine, Eastern Europe. And I got my eyes open to the world, and spent, 5 years doing the international travel, and also at the last part of that, switched to another ministry organization called Dynamic Churches International, and we worked with them for a little while before it was discovered that I had cancer. And then that's when life changed around a whole lot for us, and that since the prognosis was quite lousy of 2 to 4 years, and didn't have any life insurance, and it's really hard to get when you're terminally ill. It's impossible, unless it's a group insurance. And so I went back to pastoral ministries with the Christian Missionary Alliance, and I got group insurance. It's a terrible motivation, but I also loved the church, so we enjoyed it, and went on them for another 4 or 5 years, and then I switched to a Baptist church. Well, I hadn't died yet, so I thought, and I was an associate, and I felt like, maybe I'm going to be really unusual, and I'll be 1 in 100 that doesn't die of this particular kind of cancer. So I said, if that happens, I want to be a senior pastor again. And so I resigned from my position as an associate in St. Albert Alliance, and took a position as the senior pastor of Steel Heights Baptist Church here in Northeast Edmonton. And I did that for 6 years, and then my cancer had come back once in there and had more surgery, but it had come back for the last time, and they said, there's nothing more we can do for you. And so they put me on long-term disability, and I left the ministry, the official ministry, and then I took up a ministry of hanging around with biker dudes and going for coffee as often as possible with whoever would go. And that's been a lot of fun too. And here I am now. Oh, but they did discover some chemotherapy stuff in this whole process, and I was, after I left the church, I had about 5 years of different kinds of chemotherapy, and until nothing was working anymore. And now I'm at I have cancer and it's growing and it's gonna kill me in the next while. And the average is about 6 to 9 months. And I'm at 7 months now. So, and I'm feeling tired now. So that's why we're doing this, to get everything down and recorded before I croak. No, before that reminds me of a joke. I taught my daughters this, I forget which one, and that's probably good, to climb up on their grandpa's lap and say, "Grandpa, make a sound like a frog." And Grandpa said, "Why?" "Because Daddy told us that when you croak, we'll get a new van." And Grandpa thought it was pretty funny. My wife never thought it was all that funny, but Grandpa thought it was funny. Anyhow. Well, just about everybody who has GIST, which is gastrointestinal stromal tumor, it's a type of sarcoma cancer that's so rare that in a lifetime of practicing medicine, very few doctors ever come across it. And so I went through 5 misdiagnoses until I got kind of upset at one guy who told me it was all in my head. And I raised my voice a little bit to him and suggested that if it was all in my head, perhaps my stomach wouldn't hurt so much. And he said, "Okay, one more test," and then it was found. I learned, I was ticked at the time that I had to go through all of this and nobody could tell me what was wrong when it was a big tumor. But I have since found out that that's almost the standard par for the course for this kind of cancer, because nobody comes across it. It's very unusual. And so I understand that that's pretty much how it happens, except I do worry that a lot of times people won't be as aggressive as I was at making them find out what it was. Other people might just say, "Well, the doctors can't find anything," and then go home and die. When in fact there is chemo now, and there's different things. There is no cure. Chemo just slows things up so that you don't have 2 to 4 years to survive. You might have a few more. And I also got diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, about the same time, shortly after my first surgery. And I ended up on a diabetes drug that they have recently discovered is very effective in dealing with certain kinds of cancers. And that's probably why I'm here 16 years later. But nobody knows for sure, because a lot of medicine is not an exact science, which is something that was new information for me. Because I thought, hey, it's just a matter of a few lab tests and a few checks here and a CAT scan here or there, and we've got her nailed. But it doesn't work that way. So, I mean, even in my second surgery, where I lost about a third of my liver, which grew back, it came back from the pathologist that it was another kind of cancer. And I've been actually diagnosed with 4 different kinds of cancer, but every time it was just the one kind of rare cancer. So, but I'd learned that it's okay to ask questions. In fact, it's almost necessary. So, my most uncomfortable exam. It's not the upscope or the downscope. I said this the other day when I resigned or dropped out of a couple of internet support groups, that for this particular kind of cancer with people from all over the world and so on. I just said, you know, I'm going to let the disease run its course now. There's nothing more. There's no more medications. There's surgery won't do a thing, and so on. So I'm just going to let things run the course. But one of the biggest surprises for me during this whole 16 years and of 2 or 4 surgeries, I mean, it depends whether you count just the major ones or whether there's all kinds of other little surgeries and so on. But I've been surprised at how little the whole process hurt. Chemotherapy it was a lot easier than the old style of chemotherapy, but that was the worst thing, was the chemo when, you know, your head is aching, you feel like you're gonna vomit all the time, and all kinds of other side effects. The side effects of chemotherapy were the hardest things to do. And the shingles, I got shingles because of compromised immune system. And that hurt, as in pain. But other than that, I mean, the biopsies, needle biopsies into my liver and so on, yeah, they hurt, but, and 60, count them, 60 CAT scans. I'm kind of nervous about this because it brings in, you know, the really interesting part that, you know, I'm going to be dying. This is my once in a lifetime opportunity to tell you my parting comments. So I want you to listen carefully. My wife and kids. My wife and kids, that immediately brings my heart swells. I mean, those are great people. And I've had a part in raising them and so on. That's the initial thing. The other thing, a number of the churches that I pastored had been scheduled for being shut down because things weren't going well. And I was asked to go in and fix them. And God used me that way. I'm proud of just being faithful in those cases, I guess. I don't know, is it right to be proud of your humility? People make me happy. When I see people caring about other people, it makes me happy. I really am happy when I see little kids, toddlers and babies and so on, playing and laughing. The greatest sound in the earth, I think, is the laughter of little children. That makes me happy. My biggest fear would be that I wouldn't have made a difference with my life, that I would have wasted it all. I had a dream one night. It was a nightmare, basically. It was when I was leaving one of the churches and moving to another, and I had this vision of I was looking down into the pit of hell. There was all these people I could see from that town, and one of them looked up at me. He yelled at me and said, "Ron, you never told us. You never even tried." That
was frightening. And then, of course, when I woke up and analyzed it and I knew who that person was, I knew that I had tried. That would be my fear, that I wouldn't even try to rescue people so that, like Jesus said, where I am, you may be also. I just wanted to make sure that I say some things that I was advised in an article I read not long ago. Things to say before you die. And there's 4 of them. And number 1 is thank you. Most of you who will be seeing this are friends, relatives, and I want you to know I went through life because of you guys. It's been fun sharing the journey with you. Thank you for being with me. And the second thing is I love you guys. I really do. Of course, my wife and my family, but I haven't met a person that I haven't really cared about. I think that's a work of God in my life because I couldn't always say that. But if you're watching this or you're at my funeral, whatever, then you're a friend and I love you. Third thing is I ask you to forgive me because I have messed up at times. I have said things that might have been hurtful. I have not said things that could have been helpful that you'd wanted me to. I don't want to go into the long list of possibilities, but I want you to forgive me. And because I don't want you to carry a burden or a grudge around, and they can always be dumped if you forgive others. So please forgive me, and that I forgive you. Sometimes you said things that have hurt me. You've lied to me. I don't know why that one just flashed back in, but maybe it's something you're thinking, oh, I should have made this right before Ron died. Well, you know what? You're forgiven. You're forgiven. Because I'm not going to be taking any of that stuff with me to the grave. It's going to be left for the Lord to deal with. So, folks, thank you. I love you. Forgive me. And I forgive you. And it's been a great journey together. I love you. Goodbye.